Unlike Mr. J, at least Todd has a plan. Here's your look at brand new McFarlane toys, DC Multiverse, The Dark Knight Trilogy, The Joker. No name strikes terror into the hearts of Gotham City's citizens quite like the Joker. In a city overrun by larger-than-life criminals, the always-laughing villain stands alone, a complete psychopath with no moral compass whatsoever. The Joker, whose real name and identity remain completely unknown, is characterized by his chalk-white skin, green hair, and permanent rictus grin stretched across his face. But there isn't a single thing funny about this particular clown, who only finds humor in the suffering of others. While I may not be able to tell you where the Clown Prince of Crime got his scars from, I can certainly tell you where I got this figure from. And that's the folks over at McFarlane Toys. Once again, a big thank you to them who took the time and did provide the sample of all of the new Dark Knight Trilogy figures that we could have a look at over the span of now 4 videos. I'm going to grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. And like the Joker's coming apart at the seams, it seems the same could be said for my tape measure. I'm going to probably have to look into getting a new one. In the meantime, though, Joker stands about 7¼ inches in height, or the figure's about 18 centimeters tall. You wanted me. Here I am. Here's what Joker looks like. With Christian Bale's Batman, it never gets old. Boy, Batman's raspy voice. In this case, you can actually see that the Joker is taller than Batman, and that's even including the points of his cowl. Here's also what the figure looks like with the last released figure, or the last figure we just recently looked at, and that's the Scarecrow. And then we also had a look at Two-Face, who these two do team up, not knocking Joker over in the process. These two do team up to some extent, although we really don't see the two of them teaming up on screen, at least battling Batman. But yeah, a good bunch of characters, and through this, of course, we've been building ourselves Bane, now marking finally the hands and the head that came included with Joker. We can now say we finally completed Bane, short of just putting the rest of him back together. So why don't we actually do that? To come included with Joker, you get yourself only one head for Bane. Not that you necessarily needed to have another head. I guess they probably could have included a secondary head that had the broke valves or the tubes that he had in front of his mask near the end of the movie. But this is a fine looking Bane for right now. This, of course, is going to go on top of his neck. But just before that, the figure also comes included, not for Joker necessarily, but for Bane, he comes with a pair of closed fists. Now, one does have, again, the fingerless gloves. That's going to go then on one side of his body. Then the regular non-gloved hand is going to go to the other. The figure also does have couple of pointing hands or gestured hands or big, long monologue hands for, of course, when he's addressing the prisoners. So you get a couple of those. And then the figure also comes included with a couple of mauling hands for breaking the bats. You know, actually, as a side note, it would have been nice that they could have thrown in the broken helmet or the broken head, the mask for Batman, of course, that Bane does sort of keep as a trophy. So I guess he doesn't keep it necessarily as a trophy. He sort of just discards it on the ground and walks off his merry little way. But let's bring in Bane where we've left off. I mean, we are missing, of course, hands. We are missing the head. So let's go, first of all, and grab a couple of hands here. I'm going to grab the gestured monologue hands. Bane's all about giving those monologues. We're going to pop one hand in place. Very, very easy to do. And let's grab the other hand here. Pop that in. You know what? I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to plug those in. One good thing about using the large size pegs that they did, it makes things very easy, not only to pop in these hands, but if you decide later on you want to use different hands, then you have, again, a bunch to choose from. It does almost look like he does have large hands when you look at the proportions for the rest of his forearms and his biceps. But, you know, again, other than that, like nice looking Bane. And then we can go ahead and pop the head onto the neck. Obviously, in this case, like sort of the figures we've been looking at, they have exaggerated some of the proportions. I might have to even use hot water to heat the head here. I think they've exaggerated some of the proportions because when looking at Bane, he looks a little off like that. I'm definitely going to have to fix this guy up just a little before we get down to the review of him. Fixing the head, heating it with hot water. I'm going to pop that onto the head, to the neck. I do think like the proportions of his body seem very big, very tall when he has seems like almost a slightly smaller head. But again, we're going to be looking at this guy in his own separate review. And between takes, of course, I'm going to fix him up, make him look a little bit more prim and proper and ready for his review. Okay, so let's move on to the things that come included with Joker. Guns, no. You're not going to get any guns. You're not going to get any explosives or anything along those lines. What you are going to get, at least, is a stack of money. We're all about getting stacks of money. First time, I think, in fact, in any of the DC Multiverse figures, we've actually gotten ourselves a big wad of green, a big wad of cash. But before we actually do that, you get yourself an image, I believe, of the poster, the original promotional poster before they sort of really started to market this thing. And what a marketing juggernaut the Dark Knight was. In this case, you can see that behind the glass, the Joker is smearing the S to say, "Why so serious?" Boy, that was a capturing poster. Even the first time I remember seeing this, it might have even been at a subway station or a bus station. The first time I looked over at it, and this was even really before we got heavily into the marketing end of things. I just remember looking over at that, and I remember thinking, that looks a lot like Joker. Sure enough, it was. Flipping around to the back of the card, though, one thing you will not get is a real name. The real name is unknown in this case, and you get yourself a paragraph read, which I guess is the most closest to the way that Joker is in the movie. Unlike the Two-Face, which is really a departure from his origin story in the actual movie, and even Scarecrow being sort of questionable, Joker's actually is the closest, I feel, in the description. Even like Batman's was a little bit off as well. Joker's, I think, is the most closest. I'm going to move that to the side as well. Okay, so the figure comes included with technically 2 display stands. It's not a riddle either. The figure comes with just a regular black display stand. I know we've seen this countless times before with the DC logo down below, yes. And of course, the neighboring peg off to the corner there. But then you also get technically the wad of money comes with a peg as well. Now, the peg doesn't give you a lot of space to really work with. I mean, if you were just to take Joker's feet and get as best close to that peg as you can, I mean, you can see how close the figure's feet go to that peg. And I mean, really doesn't necessarily serve as a functioning display stand. I almost don't even feel like they needed to put a peg there in the first place. If anything, the wad, I'm just going to keep calling it a wad. If anything, I would just have the wad next to the figure. And then if I really did want to use myself a display stand, I would just use the one that came included with the figure also as well. I don't really think like the wad. I'm going to stop calling it the wad. I don't really think the stack of money necessarily needed to have its own designated peg. Getting a closer look, though, at the wad, you get yourself stacks of bills. Lots of bills. There's no actually markings on this. I mean, if I was to look at this, not that I'm an expert when it comes to producing cash, I'd hate to think I was. I mean, I would be looking at this and think that that's counterfeit. I mean, there's nothing on that to even tell us what dollar amount this is. But you can see that they're all sort of wrapped off. None of the wrappings actually, unfortunately, are colored in paper, are colored in that paper color. There's all sort of the same green color. The base itself, if you can call it a base, technically is hollow. You can kind of see the way it's very soft plastic that they've used. But I mean, for a serviceable wad, I think that's a nice stack of money. I would love, in fact, to actually get a bigger stack of money, the kind that he actually slides down and burns in the movie. But I think that's a good wad for right now. Seriously, I'm going to stop calling it a wad. We're going to move that to the side. Getting a closer look at Heath Ledger's Joker. What a fine looking figure this is. I think we've had a pretty good time. I've had a good time, at least, saying this behind the camera, looking at the all recent figures here from McFarlane's team, covering, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy. If you really count Bane, that's covering all the three films in the trilogy. And, of course, Heath Ledger's Joker appearing only in the second one. Boy, does he certainly leave his mark, literally and figuratively. The mark across his face, again, a big scar there. I mean, it's a really interesting design Joker. I didn't initially like it, but the more, of course, I've seen him in Dark Knight. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen now Dark Knight. I love Heath Ledger as Joker. He's not still my favorite. If I was to think of a perfect looking Joker that I'd like to see on the big screen, I don't know if necessarily I would always want to have a scarred Joker, but I gotta say, like, his look is so memorable in this movie, and I think it works very well here for a figure. I don't think there's really much I would have changed necessarily likeness-wise. I think it's actually one of the better likenesses we've gotten from these figures. I think the Bale Batman, and the Heath Ledger Joker, I think are the two best that we've gotten from this. And that's not even counting the Bane that we're going to be looking at in a separate review. The only thing I would certainly say, though, when it comes to this one, is that the makeup is very clean. The eyeshadow, for example, or the smearing of black that he has around his eyes, not to mention, again, the red that he paints around his lips, is all very cleanly handled. In the movie, of course, it tends to degrade, and he has it just smeared across his face, and a lot of times he just has makeup missing altogether. Like, this is a pretty clean-looking Joker, as we certainly see. I almost feel, again, like the dinner party Joker. you know, when he comes over to, like, for example, Rachel, he goes, well, hello. That sort of is like the Joker that I'm kind of getting in this idea. It's not police precinct Joker where he already has the smeared face, and of course Batman just beats the crap out of him in the cell. I would love to certainly see a version of this guy, maybe without the jacket at some point. I mean, the jacket is part of his vest, so you can't even remove it even if you wanted to. But I would love to maybe see this guy get the vest and just get the regular printed shirt underneath that as a future release. And I'm sure they probably could easily get the most mileage out of this mold and not just use it again and just smear up the face just a little bit more than what we actually get right here. If any bit of criticism I could offer up here, I like the coloring of the hair. The hair is very consistently green. I think, in fact, in the movie, it's actually more streaky, where he has like brown in some areas, he's got green in the other areas. Like in this case, they sort of have just kept the same color consistent and colored everything in this swamp green color. The only other thing I would certainly say also is the skin coloring for his neck seems a little on the more kind of yellowish side. Maybe just making that a little bit more warmer in tones, like he's actually a living creature, a living being, I think probably would have been one thing. And also too, like this, the coloring of his neck is very close to the coloring of his face. I think if they had made the coloring a little bit more closer, well, like let's just say for the example here, I just knocked Batman over. Let's pick him up here for a second. If I was to say bring in Two-Face, the coloring that they used for Two-Face, if they had kept that about the coloring of the neck for the Joker, I think you'd have a really nice divide where the skin, where the makeup on his face would be very much lighter than the coloring for his neck. If that makes any sense. I know it's a bit long-winded. But yeah, I do really like the look of this figure quite a lot. I mean, the head sculpt is not, again, just short of a few little things like smearing of face and stuff like that. But the only thing I really would have changed to it. The rest of the body, of course, he does have the long-tailed jacket. In this case, the jacket I already mentioned is already attached to his vest. One thing I did notice, though, is that this section here is very soft, and it sinks in by quite a lot. I'm wondering why they made this so sunk in. I mean, obviously, you want to make sure that there's lots of articulation still happening here on this figure, but like I've noticed, like the vest is very soft plastic, sculpted very well. You can see a little bit of the traces of his shirt. Sad to say, though, the shirt is not printed. It's only just colored in the blue. The tie, also being a darker color of the blue, blends in with the shirt. I wish they could have actually patterned the shirt like he has actually in the movie. He does also have the little chain that he has from one end of his belt, or one part of his belt, to the back here, and that's handled with a softer plastic. So just be careful when it comes to actually moving this guy's legs out, that you don't grab onto this by mistake and tug and just not rip it. But he does also have, like, now for his jacket, flip this around to the back so you can see all the details here on the back of the figure's body. Now, again, this is softer plastic. This is harder plastic that they would have used for the arms. Like, you do notice that there is a little bit of a color divide, a color separation between the two. Like, this seems a little more purple, or purple heavy, whereas this has not as much. And it could also just be the fact that just because the materials that they used, it just does result in like this looking almost a little lighter, I think, than this. This has a little more of a purple color tint to it. The only other thing I would have also said about this figure too is that he doesn't have any other hands in what you see right now. One hand is a closed fist. One hand is deliberately there, I'm sure, to hold the gun. And obviously we can't start using guns. We haven't been able to use guns for a while when it comes to these releases. So you would have to find a gun from another figure. I mean, that's not a hard thing. I probably could easily find one in my totes. But I kind of wish that this guy could have come with something to warrant the idea that he actually has a gripping hand like this. What I ended up doing in the beginning of this review, when I had this guy first on the rotisserie, is I sort of had the arm bent like this. Or did I even have the arm? I may have even had the arm straight. But I think for posing this guy until eventually I find myself a gun, I might actually have it look as if he's actually reaching into his pocket like I did at the beginning, pulling out his card. I think that's kind of a nice look for him as well. Until, of course, I find myself a gun that I could probably put in his hands. But I do kind of wish that this guy could have had swapped out hands, that down the road, if you did manage to find yourself a couple of things that you could put into his hand, like a crowbar, a bomb, I'm trying to think of other things like guns. Any guns would be fine and ideal for Joker. You at least would have another hand to work with down the road. Again, like just overall a nicely designed figure. You again got the details there. He doesn't have, again, obviously the coloring of his socks, just simply because they would have swapped that out for the peg that they used for the ankle joint. But overall, again, nice looking figure. The only thing, again, what I would have said is, like, I would have just roughed up his face a little bit, kind of the way that Bale roughs up his face in the movie. Literally, like that actor beat the crap out of Heath Ledger, unfortunately, in the movie. Heath Ledger, I think, told Bale just to let him have it, and Bale let him have it. I would have certainly said rough this guy's face up just a little bit, just to smear up the makeup just a little bit more than what we're actually getting right here. But I'm sure this guy is going to be a tease for what we may get for future police precinct a Joker. Maybe then we could actually get ourselves a Joker that actually has the clapping hands. who's to say? Anyways, for the articulation here for Joker, we're going to start with his head, of course. We're going to rotate the head all the way around. This is to show you, guys, that he does have a ball joint at the base of the head. So it does move the head down. You have the head looking up. And that's as far back as you can actually get it, just because the length of the hair obviously is going to get a little in the way of things. You can move the head also back and forth also as well. Yeah, that's a guy that does not have a plan whatsoever. You can easily move the arms out, I would say, at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and rotate them all the way around. The figure does have a bicep swivel. Figure also possesses a double hinge on the elbow, and you can rotate the hands all the way around. Now, again, I already talked about the fact that this is a fairly soft plastic that they implemented here for the top of his torso. They probably did that so there was as much give as it is when it comes to rotating this guy at the top of his body. I mean, you can really feel like there's nothing really getting in the way of things. You can bring the torso back. I mean, it's going to look a little awkward. You can also rock it back and forth also as well. So there's a lot of stuff you can get going here when it comes to posing this guy. Legs, once again, seem to be on ratcheted joints. Just be careful of the chain. The legs do hinge forward, of course, and they also, of course, hinge backward. Figure has a mild swivel at the top of the thigh, more for the way it was assembled than actually articulation. Speaking of articulation, the figure does have double hinges on the knees, and he also has an articulated ankle, not only back and forth this way, an ankle rocker back and forth this way, and Heath Ledger's Joker also does possess toe articulation. All the figures, in fact, have had toe articulation. That also includes the Batman that we looked at first. Speaking of the Batman that we looked at first, just get Joker to stand here and bring in the Batman. This showing you guys right now, and you know what, we'll just bring the wad in also as well. These two guys right now, I think, are my favorite from this wave. Overall, just again, really, really happy with how this wave turned out. We have still to build. I want to finish off the rest of Bane. I want to make sure I got that head properly on Bane's neck. And there, of course, we're going to be looking at that guy in a separate review. But again, like these two, I think, are the ones that I really like the most from this wave. The Two-Face was good. The Scarecrow was good. But easily for me, my favorites are the Bale Batman and the Heath Ledger Joker. And again, like as a continuation, I almost even feel like to talk about this guy getting a police precinct release, just with the vest, just with maybe clapping hands. If anything, they might even be able to package a police precinct or prisoner Joker along with a Christian Bale Batman, even with an angrier expression. That's a set I would pick up in an instant. So, what are you up to? Oh, I'm just resting against my wad. Here in Final Looks, we've got Joker here doing, in fact, that, resting against a big wad of money. The wad of money does have a peg on the front of it, although you probably can already see I've got it flipped around the other way and I've got it just resting on his defaulted display stand, the same stand that's come included with all the other figures, and that's doing the job fine on its own. I honestly don't even think the peg needed to be there in the first place. I suppose they probably put it there so that if you did decide you wanted to use the stack of money as the thing that Joker stands on top of, there was at least a peg available there. But honestly, how well Joker stands on his own anyways, I don't even think the peg needed to be in there. I mean, here, in this case, with him leaning back like I've got him right now, I've actually got him attached onto the regular display stand, and that's going to be at least a pose I'm going to stick with for right now until eventually I come across any weapons that I can have him wielding. Yeah, it's a shame that, again, Joker, much like all the other DC Multiverse figures, if they include or were to include a gun, they basically just axe that all together. They probably could have packaged this guy at least with a detonator. I think a crowbar could still be passable. I don't know really what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Again, I don't work for McFarlane Toys. Maybe even crowbars. Anything that really is a blunt, anything that can hurt somebody, I think is probably not something that they can include. They can include swords. Swords, I think, is still fine. But yeah, if they wanted to include a knife, maybe a knife was a no-go. A crowbar would have been also a nice thing to include with the figure. A gun is certainly something I'm going to look for right away after this video is finished up. Because again, I like the idea. If I could find myself even a shotgun, maybe a sawed-off shotgun or something I could put in this guy's hand, I would certainly like to display this guy with something other than what he has right now, which is a big old goose egg. No, he doesn't actually. He doesn't have an egg in his hand. But a really nice looking Joker overall. And again, I hope this is a ... leading to an eventual release of this guy in a vest with, again, the smeared makeup on his face. I'm sure I probably talked about that to nausea, but while I do like the sculpting of his face, I think the Joker is the best figure that we've gotten from a likeness standpoint. But again, I would have certainly messed up the makeup just a little bit more than what they did. But again, like depending on where you want to have your Joker depicted from, this could either, again, be Joker. I was kind of thinking of this when I'm looking at this, as clean and proper as he is. It's kind of like either when he's walking into the room and he's telling the rest of the mob, this is basically what I want to do. A magician never does anything for, what was he say? He never does anything for free, never shows the trick for free. But I mean, or I would also think of this guy as like the dinner party scene, where again, he's going around, he's trying to drink the wine, he's trying to drink the champagne, he's spilling it off to his shoulder, he's hitting on Rachel and let her go, bad choice of words. That's kind of where I see this Joker standing from. Not necessarily the police precinct, but I would certainly like to see a version of that Joker get released in the not-so-distant future. Long-winded, very long-winded. I think it was the wad of money that just sort of threw me off. But what do you guys think of Joker? Let me know down below in the comment section. And short of actually looking at the Bane, which is still the last figure we have yet to look at because we've been building this guy the whole time. Short of that, what do you think of the 4 figures is the best figure from this wave? Do please let me know down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the Heath Ledger Joker that we can have a look at in this review. If you guys enjoyed this video, why not throw it a like? If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. We have wrapped up technically all the figures from this wave, but we will be looking at the Build-A-Figure Bane in his own separate review, so he's still coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.